It was the 1st of the 4th, 2012 when my friend let me have his copy of Pokemon Black. My friend had a tendency of selling his consoles but keeping the games, by evidently still owning Super Street Fighter 4, though he hasn't had an Xbox 360 since a year ago. The same applied for Black. He recently sold his DSi to GameStop to make some money for the longboard he wanted. Of course, when I asked him if he was willing to give it to me for free, he hesitated, but agreed as long as I would find a way to transfer out his Pokemon. I had a friend who would help me trade out the Pokemon, but he was in Oregon for the holidays, so he had to leave all his stuff at home. Over the next few days, I had the game in my dresser drawer waiting for my friend to get back from his vacation. Until then, I thought to myself, I guess I can start a new game just as long as I don't save. My starter, of course, had to be Oshawott, and I nicknamed him Chip. In every Pokemon game I've played since Crystal, I've come up with 2 rules. Rule 1, the first 6 Pokemon I catch would stay with me until I beat the Elite Four. Rule number 2, I also could not catch any more after I've caught these 6 until after the Elite Four. Because of these rules, I usually refrained from catching any Pokemon until later. I didn't catch my second Pokemon until I reached Nacrene City. It was a female Blitzel. I finally made it to Pinwheel Forest and managed to beat Team Plasma with Blitzel alone. Which was good because she needed some training. After the events with Team Plasma, I decided to remain in the forest before venturing on to the next town because I have a habit of leveling up my team to the next nearest 10. This was mostly because I loved having the upper hand in the next gym battle. While there, I also thought to have a look around for any items that could be useful. While walking around, I encountered a patch of rustling grass. Being my first time seeing one, I didn't know what to expect. I was overall unfamiliar with this generation and the only information I knew about was related to N. But I decided to go for it. The patch of grass began to move away from me and I immediately thought, I have to chase after it? Well, certainly makes catching Pokemon interesting, I guess. I followed it for a minute where I realised I don't really think this is worth it, so I began walking back. As I began my walk back to the path, I noticed I wasn't in a familiar part of the forest. It didn't concern me much since I was thinking I could probably find more items this way. That's when my game screen began to shake and large roots came out from behind the trees blocking my path back. I had thought back to a Pokemon Ranger I'd battled while in pursuit of the Plasma Grunt with the Dragonite skull, mentioning that the forest was alive and every day something changes. So I had thought, this is what he was talking about. It was a maze that would shift randomly. So I began walking in the other direction to see if I could find another way around. After walking in a straight line for a while, I began to think that this probably wasn't a good idea. Just then, an exclamation point icon appeared above my character's head, and the screen panned left to a woman in a dark green ball gown, as though she'd just come from a fancy party. She was facing the opposite direction, and as I approached her, the exclamation point icon appeared above her head. She turned around to face my character and immediately said,
"Oh, well if it ain't nothing but a child. What are you doing this far out in the woods, sugar? Not trying to scare anyone, I hope."
She waited for my character to respond. When he didn't, she continued to talk.
Well, not much of a talker, are you? Well, you should come with me anyway. We'll see if we can't do something about your predicament.
She began to lead my character west and into a town called Pinwheel Village. I hadn't noticed it on the town map the last time I checked, and the music was a blues-influenced version of Route 1 from the original Pokemon game. She continued to lead my character through the town, which was a rural-styled. Almost all the houses were made of wood and old-fashioned, the only exception being the stone cottages at the entrance. As we walked, she began to speak.
Pinwheel Village is an old town and was built on a swamp. My family's owned these fertile lands for generations. We don't get many visitors round here, so I apologize if I seemed startled by y'all earlier.
We finally stopped in front of a building that had a small sign on the front which I could not read because it was written in that universal gibberish for international cartoons. My first assumption that this was some type of herbal shop. The woman then said,
"This here's our town's Pokemon Center. Feel free to heal up your Pokemon. Then when you're done, come by my mansion and take on my gym challenge. I'll be waiting for y'all, so don't keep me waiting."
She then walked north off the screen. Immediately I pulled out my town map and checked where I was. And sure enough, I was in Pinwheel Village, just west of Pinwheel Forest, just before reaching the coast. I then made my way into the Pokemon Center, but everything in there was totally different compared to the last Pokemon Center I was in. First of all, there was no upstairs for communicating with other players, no PC and no Pokemart. It was cramped looking in there, but the nurse at the end of the hall, along with what appeared to be a small pinkish Pokemon. I remind you, I know nothing of this generation, so I still don't know certain Pokemon's names, were the only ones in there. I approached the desk and talked to the nurse. Instead of the regular greeting, she simply said,
"Welcome. Y'all look tired. Why don't you have a quick lie down?"
When my screen came to, I exited and made my way to the gym. I noticed that all the houses were locked and the only person out was standing facing his Purloin. When I pressed A on him, he said, "They are busy playing. Maybe it's best we don't disturb them." At first, I saw nothing but fenced wheat on both the left and the right side of my screen. The walkway was about 3 spaces wide, and I had passed by an open gate earlier, so I assumed I'd entered the plantation. Upon approaching the gym, the camera began to move behind my character as if I was walking right behind him, so I saw the mansion in total detail. The first thing I noticed was a huge mansion. Next, I noticed the large amounts of vegetation growing on it, which included vines, roots, similar to ones that blocked my path earlier, and an extremely large tree bursting out of the roof of the complex. Multiple branches poked out of windows and balconies. I knew from that view that it was going to be a grass gym. Since I had no fire types, the best option was using Blitzel. Seeing as Chip, who was Do What Now, was a water type, I thought she stood a better chance. Entering the gym, I was greeted by the music of any normal gym, but the man near the statues who was supposed to give me advice was not there. This was strange, but I thought nothing of it, since I didn't really need any advice for this gym. As I looked around the rest of the room, I noticed the building on the inside looked just as destroyed as on the outside. Roots were digging into the floor, vines were spreading on the wall, and shrubs grew from cracks in the walls. As I walked forward, the floor was covered in the same roots as earlier, and just as I was about to take my first step onto them, the screen began to shake and they opened up, leaving a giant gaping hole in the floor and a set of stairs. A trainer climbs up and says, "Well, it's been a while since we had a challenger. I promised to make it worth the trip." When the battle sequence started, the trainer's sprite looked a lot like a mature version of the male character from Sinnoh when he wears his tuxedo. His trainer class was Ballroom Dancer Stanley. The trainer had a Deerling and a Pansage, which were both taken out by Blitzel's Stomp attack. After the battle, the trainer says, "If you want to get to our gym leader, you're going to have to battle all of us in the ballroom. Every time you beat one of us, a new route at the end of the room grows out, extending the bridge a little more." Just as he had finished the sentence, the screen panned north and began to shake. I saw a root come up, patching the bottom bit of the gap of the floor at the end of the room. Seeing as the opponents weren't very tough, I decided that in the next battle I would use Tito to gain some experience. The next set of roots came up, and just like the last time, the screen shook and the roots moved, revealing another trainer. This time it was a young trainer in a yellow ball gown.
"May I have this dance?"
Her name was Ballroom Dancer Jessica. Her sprite was a young brunette around age 10 or 11 in a big yellow dress. She had both a Deerling and a Snivy around level 16. As before, her Pokemon were fairly weak, so it was easy experience for Chip. By now, Chip was level 20, and Blitzel was level 17. The battle ended, and she ends with,
"Was I being polite?"
The bridge then grows a bit more. Now, what I expected to be the final trainer was left, seeing as the bridge only had one route remaining. I approached the next set of routes. As before, the screen shook and the roots spread, only this time revealing a pair of trainers, a male and female. The man wore a dark green vest and the woman wore a black dress. The text box appeared. "Jack, we are the best dancers in this room, so don't expect us to let up easily. Diane."
"To get to Samantha, you'll have to do better than that."
The battle then started. Their sprites were very dark, almost Hispanic. Both were dark haired and were making the classic tango pose with both hands together pointed at the character. "Tango couple Jack and Diane would like to battle," the text box said. They had 3 Pokemon instead of the normal 2 that the other trainers had. The first 2 were Simisage and Maractus, I hadn't seen a Maractus yet, so I was a bit excited about it, but not as excited as I was going to be when I found out what was next. They were hit by my Chip's Razor Shell and Blitzel's Stomp, of course. The Simisage survived the stomp without even a dent, but Maractus had gone down with one hit. The next Pokemon to appear was a Pokemon called Hollow Seed, which I had never even heard of. Its cry was like the sound of rustling leaves with two wooden objects hitting one another. It looked like a walnut halfway pried open to reveal two red eyes, similar to Kabuto. In the dark hollow space inside the shell, in its animation it rocked back and forth a bit, stopped, then the eyes moved left and right inside the shell as though looking around, then the animation repeated itself. Assuming that it was just a Pokemon I would encounter later in the wild, I attacked. This time I used Stomp on Hollow Seed and Razor Shell on Simisage. Simisage went down no problem, but the Hollow Seed didn't take a hit. It had no effect, so it must have been a Ghost type. I thought to myself, Ghost Grass Pokemon? That's a first. At least something new, right? The Pokemon then attacked with Bullet Seed. The next turn I KO'd it with Razor Shell before it could attack again. The match ended and the text box appeared. Jack. It takes two to tango, doesn't it? Diane.
Yet you still beat us by yourself.
The final route then shot out the wall, completing the bridge and allowing me to cross over to the gym leader. She was standing there at the base of the tall tree's shadow, with a beam of sunlight almost like a spotlight, casting out from between the leaves in its colossal branches. I approached gym leader and pressed A.
You know, I just realized I never properly introduced myself. I'm Samantha, the owner of this plantation. And what do they call you? Santy. Now that's a mighty powerful name. Well now, child, y'all kept me waiting long enough. It's my turn to dance with y'all. So don't hold anything back and give it all you got.
Samantha's battle sprite had much more elegance than that of her overworld sprite. She was blonde and wore her hair in a bun, with a white and purple flower on the side of her head and two streaks of hair running down both sides of her face. She had a beauty mark on her left cheek and had light green eyes. She wore long gloves going halfway up her bicep, her dress sleeveless and starting from the top of her neck, and a slim fit until the waist. There, it spread out into a beautiful cascade of green and yellow dotted light green flowers, thickening into a light green mist towards the bottom of the dress. Her first Pokemon was a Hollow Seed. Mine was Chip. As my first attack, I chose Razor Shell and took care of her Pokemon without hesitation. The next Pokemon was another Hollow Seed, so I decided to use Blitzel this time because she lacked experience. For this attack, I couldn't use Stomp, so I decided to use Charge and then attack with Shockwave. Hollow Seed used Vine Whip, which took out a quarter of Blitzel's health. The next time I attacked and KO'd it, Blitzel leveled up to 18, learning the move Flame Charge, which was perfect for the situation I was in. The next Pokemon was called Swampress. Its cry almost the same as Hollow Seed's, except the rustling was replaced with more of a scraping sound, and the wood taps were replaced with a small drum beat like a heartbeat. When I first saw it, the attributes that stood out to me were the same red eyes as Hollow Seed, of course giving me the idea that this was its evolution. They were at the base of the tree in the shadow of the thick white roots which were spiraling upwards, merging into a solid trunk of a tree. For its animation, it would grow a few inches appearing to bounce, but then spring back to its original height. I used Blitzel's Flame Charge and got it almost down to 0 health. Swampress then used Ingrain, but it didn't help seeing as I took it out in the next attack. That was Samantha's last Pokemon, or so I thought. The battle ended and a text box appeared.
Well, that was one heck of a battle. But don't y'all think it's over. I'm just getting started. It's time I introduce you to my strongest Pokemon.
As she said that, the music intensified and the whole gym began to shake. Roots began to detach from their place in the gym and back through the holes in the ground. Shrubs sank into the wall. Then, as the gym continued to shake, a text box appeared.
Seeing y'all this far out in the forest made me suspect something about y'all. But I didn't expect that y'all would be the strongest challengers to step foot in this gym. I can't let my family's legacy die. So with great angst, I must ask you for a rematch. And I won't take no for an answer.
The shaking began to intensify, and the tree in the background suddenly had a little red orb moving about within its hollow frame, appearing occasionally in the dark gaping holes of the bark. I immediately knew it was the final evolution of Hollow Seed. It then began to rise out of the ground, revealing 2 more red eyes in the shadows of its roots. A battle then started, but the sound was much more intense, as if fighting a legendary. Samantha rolled in, saying,
"Alright, now it's time to show me what you really got."
She then faded into the background, and the monstrous Pokemon rose from the ground. The only eye visible was one moving about inside the dark brown bark. The 2 eyes I saw earlier were reburied into the ground. The sound it made was that of a tree after being cut falling, snapping branches and landing with a loud thud. The screen only fit in everything below the branches, maybe a reference to how tall it was. My character then threw out 2 Pokeballs. Both Blitzel and Chip came out. Of course, I thought this was strange. I'm only going against 1 Pokemon, so why would I need both at the same time? It was when the status bars finally slid into view that I realized why. The Pokemon's name was Eternatree, but that wasn't all. Its level was 40, and compared to my team's level, that was a little bit high. Make that really high. The strongest Pokemon I've got is level 20. I don't stand a chance. In its animation, it would just sit quietly with its eye moving about uncoordinated, as if it was looking around for something. Then suddenly the tree would tilt back and all 3 eyes, including the now revealed hidden ones in the tangled mess of the roots, would all focus on my screen as if looking at me. Then it would repeat. Eternatree went first. It used the move Sunny Day. I immediately knew what it was trying to do. It was preparing for Solar Beam. Electra attacked first with Flame Charge, but that barely did anything. Chip used Razor Shell, which didn't do much either, but at least it lowered its defense. I had better luck this time around though. It tried to use Shadow Ball, but it missed. I then attacked with Flame Charge and Razor Shell again, reducing its health to a little bit less than half. Next round my luck ran out, because it used Shadow Ball on Blitzel and KO'd her. I was down to just Chip, and I knew I was screwed. But luckily, Razor Shell's effects had now taken their toll, and lowered its defense enough so that it was in a somewhat third quarter of its health. Next round, Eternatree was now using Ingrain, and I thought I was done for in the next turn. But just as I thought it was all over, Chip landed a critical hit on Eternatree and I won the match. In the text box after the match, text read ... The next scene after the battle, instead of fading to the overworld, was a close-up of Samantha. She was looking down with shadows covering her eyes, but tears running down her face. The Eternatree was in the background, but back to its dormant state like before battle. It appeared as if straight out of the anime, only much more detailed. Samantha looked up with tears still running down her face. She was smiling. As soon as the text box appeared, the song Sad Song from the original Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games played, but it sounded different, like it was softer and sadder, and slightly more orchestrated. She then said,
"So I get it now. Not everyone can be the strongest. I think I've known that for some time now, but I was too ashamed to admit it."
She then closed her eyes and her grin grew larger, looking cheery.
"Santy, thank you. If it wasn't for you and your Pokemon, I wouldn't have realized that. I owe you an apology. I had a bit of an outburst. I hope you'll forgive me."
A yes/no option appeared, and I chose yes.
"Oh, you don't know how much that means to me. I wish I could give you a badge for all your hard work, but I honestly don't have one. So instead, I'll leave you with something to remember me by. You'll find it upstairs in my room."
Her expression then changed to her looking over her shoulder. Her smile turned into a slight smirk.
"So I guess this is goodbye then. I wish I could say we'll meet again."
She then looked back down like from the beginning.
"Santy, when you think all is over, never lose sight of the ones you love."
And with that, she slowly faded into white and began to drift away, as if she were made of white petals and a gentle breeze was blowing her away. The now visible and still dormant Eternity began to sink into the ground. It unraveled into millions of vines in a stop-motion style, and it slowly slipped up into the ground, allowing sunlight into the now empty mansion. Wow, I thought, shocked and speechless. Game Freak really went all out on this game. That was just awesome. I was now looking at the gym, which seemed decayed as if it had been years since anybody had been there. It had shifted into a darkish brown as if the building had the life drained out of it. The music began to fade, like it would stop, but instead it continued faintly. I made my way towards the doorway on the other side of the gaping hole left behind by Eternity. I found myself in a dark room, as if it had been inside a cave. The only forms of light were once again the beams of sunlight squeezing through the holes in the roof. I then noticed a bed and thought, I could heal my Pokemon up while I'm here. I walked over and pressed A, expecting to take a nap. Instead, a text box appeared. There's a notebook on the bed. Would you like to read it? I chose yes. The music increased in volume, and another text box appeared.
November 6th, 1861. It has been 8 months since I've seen my father. He enlisted in the army to fight in the Civil War. I've seen those beasts go at each other for months now. The black and white dragons shrouded in cloud. I told my mother about it, but when she looked up, they were gone. As I was getting ready for bed, I could hear them crying out that they no longer wanted to fight. June 11th, 1862. We haven't received a letter from my father in weeks. Mother waits for him every day, outside on the bench under the tree where they would spend their time together. As for my brother, he hasn't spoken to anyone since my father left. I haven't seen the black and white dragons since May, but I could still hear them at night. When I asked my mother, she said that it was nothing, just the wind. Until my father can return home, when the war and the bloodshed stops, and until those beasts stop fighting, I won't give up as long as I carry his burning spirit. December 20th, 1862. We've just received the news. My mother's locked herself in her room since the letter's arrival. And as for my brother, nobody's heard from him since the night he disappeared. When the black dragon flew over our village, nobody saw it but me, and trying to prove it is pointless. As for me, I'll carry the legacy on my shoulders until my brother finds his way home. July 20th, 1864. My father's birthday is in exactly a month, and we're having a ball in his honor. Everyone will be there, even Jack and Diane, my family's closest friends. Seeing them dance is always the best, and with all of this, maybe I'll finally get to see my mother smile again. August 1st, 1864. I saw a Pokemon today, but something about this one was odd, as if it didn't belong here. It looked like it come from a distant land. It had short white fur, was on 4 legs with the body of a hound, black tail and a black horn that looked like a scythe on the right side of its head. It then directed its gaze in my direction. It had a dark, humanoid face and 2 red, shimmering eyes. I felt a warm sensation on my cheeks, as if near a campfire or in front of an oven. A Pokemon then directed itself towards the forest and ran off. It looked into my eyes, almost as if it was trying to tell me something. August 15th, 1864. 5 days until the ball. This morning, I woke to the sound of a Pokemon in the yard. When I went outside, I saw a quick figure dash around the side of my house, and as I turned around the corner, it was gone. However, As I returned to the door, at the foot of the first step, I found an egg. I didn't see a nest or another Pokemon around, so I decided to take it inside. At least until its mother returns. I'll make it a temporary nest until then. August 20th, 1864. The ball is tonight at 8 o'clock, so it's in about an hour. This morning, while out in the fields, I saw 3 Pokemon again. Only their appearance in comparison to the last was completely different. They all moved on 4 legs. One was thick, brown and strong looking. Another was swift, green, and made no sound as it galloped about. And the third was blue and stood upright with such presence, a dominant figure amongst the group. It looked at me, and I was overcome with a presence so familiar, I felt a sudden tear run down my face. It then turned and disappeared amongst the trees with the others. They were headed east towards the forest. I thought I saw smoke in the distance, but everyone told me not to worry. Well, I must finish getting ready for the ball. We're supposed to be expecting a very important guest.
The book ended there. I then wandered about the room looking for anything else of significance. I ended up finding a notch behind the bookcase. My character, after pressing A, reached behind the bookcase and found an egg. He placed it in my party. After this, I made my way out of the mansion. Everything was burned and it didn't look like it did as before. I never saw anyone on the way out. The music stopped and never returned. It was just silence the whole time except for the sound of my character bumping into things. The field was nothing but dry soil. The wooden houses were piles of charcoal, and the stone houses were nothing but moss-covered rocks. On my way back to the path, nothing made a sound. It was all quiet until I made it back to the familiar path leading to Castelia City. Then the music began to play again. Now, I wish I could say I still have the egg and that it hatched into something marvelous. I wish I could say that. Sadly, since I had no idea what I'd come upon until the next day, it was too late. The day before, I'd turned off the DS because I'd grown bored of it at the time, and I assumed I'd just replay it again after my friend swaps out the Pokemon. I was having a conversation with my friend, not the one who gave me the game, about it, and I asked him, "So, do you have any idea what's inside the egg? The one the chick gives you?" My friend says, "What egg?" "The one you get from Pinwheel Village after you defeat the grass gym." "What are you talking about?" "The grass gym, after you beat that chick who has all those ghost grass Pokemon." "There aren't any ghost grass Pokemon." "What about a Turntree and a Hollow Seed?" "What the hell are those?" "The grass ghost Pokemon." "Those don't even sound like Pokemon, man." I ended up explaining the whole story to him, but he didn't believe me. He said I was full of crap. This whole time I was playing the game, I thought Game Freak could just hit another jackpot on another memorable story. As soon as I got home, I got into the game and checked the map. Sure enough, the landmark for Pinwheel Village was nowhere on the map. Even the path I took to get there is gone. Ever since, I've been trying to repeat the whole thing again without success. I feel like such an idiot. Whatever Samantha had inside that egg was the legacy she left behind. I'm sorry, Samantha. PokePark Wii to me was one of those games I picked up once, powered through, then never touched again. I personally found it a bit amusing how every Pokemon you make friends with always asks you to play with them again sometime later on. Especially Mew. That must have been one of the single most frustrating bosses I've ever fought in my gaming life. To think that such a simple game would have something so frustrating to end it off boggles my mind. I sure wasn't going to re-challenge it for fun anytime soon. When you think about it, it's really no wonder Mew is stuck up alone on that Sky Pavilion with no friends. Somewhere along the line, the pleas of the Pokemon for me to return must have gotten to me, since I found a desire to play the game once more. When I turned the game on, I had figured I wouldn't be playing for very long, I'd just run around and talk to a few Pokemon until I got bored and quit, then likely not look at the game again for another year. Pikachu pranced around on the loading screen, and I couldn't help but grin. I had to give credit. This game was adorable. I mentally concluded that I'd visit all the main attractions at the zone to start off. I was dropped off at the PokePark entrance, which was a bit strange. There wasn't really any reason for me to have gone there the last time I saved, but alas, just a few extra seconds for me to run. I powered through the trail abusing the dash ability. The forest around the trail seemed odd though. It seemed a bit more dark than normal. There weren't that many trees, and what few there were dead and shriveled. The path I was walking on seemed to be made of ash too. I couldn't wait to get out of there and make it to Meadow Zone. Except when I did, I almost wished I was back at the entrance. The Meadow Zone lay in ruins. There wasn't a living tree, plant, or anything green in sight. The landscape was barren and grey, as well as the sky, with a few columns of smoke spiralling out the cracked ground, a few oddly shaped stones here and there, and scattered about were what appeared to be corpses? I took a few steps forward, but was confronted by a wonderful sight. Mew. "Oh, you're finally back! We've been waiting for you for a long time." I didn't know what it meant by we, considering that there wasn't a living thing in sight for miles. "Hey, wanna play a game?" I pondered whether to choose yes or not, considering I didn't feel like going through the pain of battling it all over again. Then, considering the current situation, I selected yes, and if it came to worst and I had to fight it, then I'd just shut the accursed game off and never let it see the light of day again. It giggled, then replied with, "Think you can win?" It paused, seemingly to let that statement sink in, then spoke with me once more. "Meet me at Venusaur's old attraction," then flew off. I started to dash off after it, then realized something. What the heck is going on here? I had a feeling this would probably be the best moment to shut the game off rather than see what was in store, but curiosity got the better of me. I continued my chase. I didn't reach very far until I was stopped by a cutscene as I neared the first corpse on my path. A Buneary. It shook, then rose off the ground. It stared at me with white, soulless eyes. Its blood-matted fur covered in dirt, grime, and gaping gashes. Then the abomination spoke. "Will you play with me?" I selected no, not really wanting to play with whatever it was. It looked genuinely distressed and persisted. "But we just wanted to play with you. It's been so long." It slowly, almost painfully crawled towards my Pikachu, then began to attack it. Or looked more like it was trying to murder it than attack it. I fought back in self-defense with an iron tail to the face, and promptly sliced its head in half. It fell to the ground, a pile of flesh. It took me a moment for it to set in that I just killed a Pokemon. I calmly backed away from the crime scene, and continued my trek chasing after the Mew as I was before. As I sped along, other corpses began to rise, although most I just knocked out of the way and into the river while dashing through. I reached Venusaur's attraction, to instead find Chikorita standing in the middle of the platform. It wasn't a zombie like the previous animated corpses, but looked as if it had gone through the apocalypse and back. It looked like it had been cut up and beat down mercilessly, the only discernible feature being its uncharacteristically grey eyes. "Help me," was the only thing it said. I turned around to find Mew right behind me, which giggled and asked, "Ready to play?" It showed the basic instructions: swing on the vine, jump as far as you can, the whole package, except when it came time to pick my character, Pikachu was the only one available, although it still had the same sad animation playing as if you couldn't select it. The gameplay was normal, except for the fact that Pikachu wasn't swinging on a vine. Instead, there were a Tropius hanging from the branch, with its intestines falling out of its mouth. Pikachu clung to the intestines, although it looked as if it would rather give up and drop down immediately instead of being forced to hold on to that. I wouldn't blame it. I swung the vine back and forth, and when I felt I had enough momentum, I let go. Pikachu soared across the track and landed just short of where the Mew stood waiting. On the after screen, Pikachu slumped onto the ground defeated, as apparently I hadn't broke the top current record. Mew giggled and spun around in the background, apparently thrilled that I lost. There were no Pokemon to be gloomy with me or cheer with Mew, as at that moment, they were all dead corpses. When asked if I would like to replay the attraction, I selected no without a doubt. Back in the overworld, Mew and Chikorita were still there, except after a few seconds, Chikorita disappeared. "You lost," Mew informed me. "Although, they aren't your friends anymore. You left them, remember?" Mew giggled. "Let's play some more. Meet me at the iceberg zone." And with that flew off and presumably towards the mentioned zone. I wasn't really feeling up to hanging out in the meadow zone any longer, so I ran as fast as I could to the meeting place with a pack of zombies trailing behind me. When I arrived, I saw it was spared no mercy. The huge treehouse that used to stand in the center was now a pile of twigs and broken planks, crushed by a gigantic boulder, a few bodies trapped underneath as well. The gates to the other zones and all other structures were torn or buried down as well. Thankfully, as I walked around here, the dead didn't rise to life and chase me. Because of this though, this place seemed more like a desolate graveyard. It actually made me feel a little gloomy. So I pressed on to the beach zone. Of course, Drifblim and the Drifblim stop were nowhere to be seen, so I had to walk by foot everywhere. The beach was no better off than anywhere else. The stark white sand contrasted with the depressing grey sky. The water had bodies floating in it, tainting parts of the ocean red. The palm trees drooped low to the ground, as if the smallest gust of wind would blow them over. There were zombies here just as in the meadow zone, still after my throat. I let one of the zombies reach Pikachu and defeat him, just to see what would happen. A corfish clawed and pounded at Pikachu with no mercy until he fell over, unmoving. "How do you like being used and left behind?" It spoke, then crawled off. Pikachu laid in a pool of his own lifeblood for a minute, which then melted into 2 or 3 or 4. It ended with me restarting the Wii. Thankfully, I restarted at the same spot on the beach where I was last, this time alive and breathing. After taking measure to maul a corfish, I sprinted across the beach to where the Lapras resided. Its skin was cracked and rotten, with some nasty looking liquid oozing out. Its shell was decayed and weathered, barely recognisable. Its head hung low, and for a brief moment, I thought it was dead just like the other Pokemon. As I approached it though, a cutscene triggered, and it raised its head to speak. "You've come back, have you?" "A little too late for that, I'm afraid. Since you've cared enough to arrive though, may as well try and fix what can be saved." It bowed its head once more, and Pikachu hopped onto its back. A little unenthusiastic about the procedure, it sailed towards the iceberg zone. Although, I couldn't help but wonder if the Lapras would actually make it that far. When the screen faded to black, a few speech bubbles popped up in the darkness, presumably from the Lapras. When they attack you, they don't mean it. They're just sad, angry, restless, frustrated. They just want things to be back to normal. We all do. After which we reached our destination. At the new zone, the ice was cracked and broken in several areas, making it difficult to maneuver through. The living dead here were frostbitten, almost like they'd been frozen alive. The huge snow Piplup and igloos were in shambles. The ice tree was broken too, many Pokemon impaled on its spikes. After several frustrating minutes of maneuvering through the tricky landscape, I made it to what used to be Empoleon's attraction. This time, Piplup was there to greet me, beat up beyond all belief and still adorning grey eyes. "Help me." Once again, the only words it spoke. Mew then floated down and asked, "Ready to play?" Pikachu was still the only Pokemon I could select. Thankfully, this attraction wasn't as grotesque as the previous, Pikachu slid down the icy ramp to the goal as normal, although the ice was cracked from several large stones in numerous areas, making it difficult to traverse. Constantly slipping on several patches of blood from Pokemon crushed underneath the boulders didn't help either. Eventually, I made it to the goal, with probably the slowest record possible. Piplup disappeared just as Chikorita had. "You lost," Mew told me once more. "Although, they aren't your friends anymore anyways. You left them, remember?" Mew paused to giggle once again. "Let's play some more. Meet me at the lava zone." And then, it was gone. I painfully made my way back to Lapras, and was actually thankful to board its horrid figure than remain on this broken icy landscape. Once we made it back to the beach zone, however, the Lapras washed up onto the sand and laid stark still. It wouldn't stir again, no matter how much I tried talking to it or hitting it with a lightning bolt. Personally, never visiting the iceberg zone again didn't upset me very much. After running and zombie chasing, I found myself in the cavern zone. Most of the tunnels were caved in by piles of boulders. Many of the rocks had decaying hands from crushed Pokemon reaching out from underneath, feebly grasping for Pikachu. I made caution to avoid getting caught by one of those hands. Eventually, after some aimless wandering, I found where the hot spring used to be. The water was even more sickly green than usual, with some vile substances floating around in it that I'd rather not know about. The Snorlax was still asleep in the middle of the springs too, except its hands, feet and other parts of its body that were submerged under the acid-like water were morphed into a melted clump of goo. Pus oozed out of its empty eye sockets and mouth, and through several cracks running along its wrinkly skin. It looked more like a fleshy, rotting type of goo than a Pokemon. The thing that disturbed me most though, was the fact that it was still breathing. I wasn't eager to join Snorlax, so I continued my trek through the cave. There wasn't any further sign of life, except for the occasional straggling Zubat or two that still wanted me dead. I finally made it to the gate that led into the lava zone, but as I approached the minecart that led into it, Mawile walked up behind me. She looked pale and bruised, although not enough to be a zombie. Vines grew around the snake mouth attached to her head like a muzzle, keeping it clamped shut. The snake mouth looked infected and swollen, with blood seeping out of its tightly shut mouth. "What are you doing here?" she spoke, then glanced at the minecart, then back to Pikachu with a look of understanding. "Going alone is suicide." Pikachu and Mawile hopped into the minecart, and it slowly started rolling past the gate. When the screen faded to black though, speech bubbles started popping up, presumably from the Mawile. "Things have changed since you left us. Without you, nobody was able to keep Mew in check. Then it fell, and when it fell, we all fell down with it. You can't change what damage has already been done, and there's no further damage to prevent. Why don't you save yourself while you still can?" Afterwards, we arrived in the lava zone. Many places were still caved in. Parts of the ground were cracked, lava bubbling up from underneath. The undead here were melting as they walked. Their skin bubbled and dripped off their bones, collecting in pools on the floor. Skeletons and skulls littered the floor, presumably from Pokemon that had completely melted away. There were several zombie Pokemon here, and some of them managed to reach Pikachu. Whenever one did though, Mawile helped fight them off, acting sort of like a bodyguard. After some wandering, a cutscene triggered where we neared the edge of a large pit. The camera panned over the edge to view dozens, maybe even hundreds of corpses filling up the hole. The bodies were melded and morphed into each other, creating an unidentifiable mass of flesh. Pikachu stood near the edge of the pit, and Mawile walked up towards him. This is where we store all the bodies that didn't have a grave. Eventually, there were so many bodies, all the lava that was previously in the pit was soaked up by them. She put a hand on Pikachu's shoulder. "Don't be one of them." Some travelling and slaying later, we found Blaziken's attraction. Charmander was here this time, worn down and grey-eyed, pleading with, "Help me." except when Mew asked if I was ready to play. Mawile stepped in front of Pikachu. I am. On the character selection screen, Mawile was the only one I was able to select. Mawile stood on the cliff looking over the lava, adjacent from the other cliff where Mew floated with the cannon. Lava filled the crater between the two cliffs, molten hands reaching out from the depths that tried to grasp Mawile and Mew. The cannon fired, but instead of boulders though, skulls and bones flew out towards Mawile. I swung and she easily blocked them with her snake mouth. Progressively though, more and more larger skeletons were being fired more frequently, and more than once Mawile was knocked down before I could react in time. At the end, I was just 500 points short of the goal. Instead of a "you lost" screen though, Mew fired another skull, which knocked out Mawile. This time though, she didn't get up. It left the attraction game and went back to Pikachu. Charmander disappeared as per protocol, alongside Mew's "you lost," although they aren't your friend anymore anyways. You left them, remember? This time, I felt more like Mew's words were directed towards Mawile, who was laying on the ground in front of the attraction, unmoving. Mew giggled. "Let's play again. Meet me at the haunted zone," and then fled. I walked over to Mawile and tried speaking to her, and was faintly surprised when she actually responded. "Leave now. Don't come back." I tried speaking to her again, and she actually said something different. "Please, save yourself." Again, once more, just to make sure she had nothing else important to say. "You know, when you left, everyone missed you. I missed you. Everyone still misses you." With that, Mawile stopped breathing and became unresponsive regardless of how much I tried talking to her again. This was the first death in game so far that genuinely upset me. Figuring there wasn't much point in trying to bring the dead back to life, especially considering she'd probably turn into a zombie that would try to kill me, I left. The travel back out of the lava and cavern zones was a bit more challenging than entering, Pikachu dying on several occasions without bodyguard, but eventually I made it out. The haunted zone was desolate and decrepit. All statues and things that once stood were torn down and broken. Unusual rocks and boulders were here too, just as in the other zones. The mansion itself had holes in its roof, and it looked like several rooms had been burned down. The main thing I noticed as I walked outside the mansion was there were no Pokemon in sight, dead or alive. It was a little relieving to be able to walk at a normal pace without the threat of being mauled. Inside, it appeared to be more of an abandoned mansion than one that was haunted. Moonlight filtered through the holes in its roof. The walls and the floor were cracked, and several doors were burned and the furniture broken. As I surveyed the area, I would catch glimpses of ghostly Pokemon at the outskirts of the screen or turning corners at the end of hallways. Of course, whenever I tried to chase after them, they were gone. Mew didn't appear at Dusknoir's attraction, so I assumed I was supposed to go to Rotom's. When I went into the underground lab, I found Mew floating there. This time there wasn't another one of Pikachu's old friends there to be put at stake. I walked up to speak to Mew, who laughed, not giggled, and asked once more, "Ready to play?" Pikachu was once again my only option. He stood in the middle of the room ready to fight off the ghosts that would soon start pouring in. When the first ghost appeared though, it was an actual spirit, not a ghost type like normal. It was a Buneary like the one in the Meadow Zone. I shot the ghost Buneary, and immediately another ghost appeared, this time a Corphish. A ton of Pokemon, mainly ones I've seen as zombies, were flying in. 3 of the most noticeable ghosts that caught my attention were the Lapras, Snorlax and Mawile. It took all I could to fend them off. There were too many though, and almost in no time at all, they captured Pikachu. You lost. Although, they aren't your friends anymore anyways. You left them, remember? This time I knew Mew meant all the Pokemon in PokePark when he spoke. It's time for you to go. Mew then proceeded to fly off to who knows where. Without any sense of direction, I wandered around aimlessly, not sure what to do next. I was expecting some sort of grand ending more than a Pokemon telling me off. I felt as if there was something more, so I headed out to the last zone I hadn't ventured to yet, the Granite Zone. The place was even more damaged than the other zones, if that were possible. The ancient ruins were in, well, ruins. Columns and structures were broken and scattered all about. And it didn't help, it was already damaged before whatever happened tore down the land. The undead were easy to fend off, and before I knew it, I was in the flower zone. The grass and flowers here were grey and wilted, trying to thrive on the few sparse rays of sunshine filtering through the heavy clouds. There weren't any dead bodies here. The only colourful living thing was the Gracidea flower and the beaten but breathing shaman standing next to it. This flower is the symbol of our salvation. It's the only thing I have left to live for, he informed me. I walked over to where Rayquaza's attraction once was to find Chikorita, Piplup and Charmander and Mew in front of it. As I approached them, Pikachu's 3 old friends surrounded him. From each, a water gun, razor leaf and flamethrower were simultaneously fired at him. Pikachu tottered, then fell over to his side into the decaying foliage, not breathing. You should have ran while you still could, Mew teased, giggling. The screen faded to black and then back. I found myself on the Sky Pavilion. The floating ruins in the sky looked as if it was broken into a million shards and pieced back together haphazardly. There was a dense fog, making it difficult to see after a few feet. Everything visible, though, was grey, rugged and devastated, including Pikachu. I walked around trying to trigger something, but nothing happened. Eventually, though, I found Mew floating among the rubble and spoke to it. When you first came here, you did everything you could to repair the Sky Prism, to save PokePark. Mew turned around to face away from Pikachu here. I broke the Sky Prism in the first place, so someone would come here and be my friend. You promised you would be my friend. That was all I ever wanted. Just one friend. Just one. Mew turned back around, and several blue shards started to fly around him. But you left. You left me. You left everyone and never returned. So I broke the Sky Prism and made sure no one recovered it, so the Sky Pavilion would crash down on everyone. Mew started to fly off, with a few parting words spoken for the final time. You lost. Although, I'm not your friend anymore anyways. You left me, remember? Before he left though, he turned to say one more thing. Have fun during the loneliness I had to suffer. This is my park now. And finally threw off the screen into the fog. I chased after him, but only ran into the edge of the floating ruins and would have tumbled right over had there not been an invisible wall to save me. I ran all around the Sky Pavilion multiple times until I pretty much had an entire map of the place mentally programmed into my brain and knew where I was going despite the fog. Eventually I gave up finding anything or a way out. Turning the game off and resetting could never get me out of that cursed place. Every time I got bored and played that game, just to see if something would happen, I'd always still be stuck at that place, lost in the fog for eternity. Sometimes though, you would drop by and pay me a visit, but every time I spoke to him, he would always just say the same words. I won. The experience I'm about to recount to you is quite short, unfortunately, but I remember it quite vividly. You remember Wally, right? The cute little boy who served as your rival in Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald? Yeah, he's easily one of my favourites. He doesn't seem to have any emotional hang-ups. He's not arrogant, he doesn't constantly call you weak, and he's not a hyperactive annoyance, and he's not trying to deceive you even for the smallest amount of time. He's just a sweet, innocent little boy who wants to be a good Pokemon trainer. He was the one I hated to beat, but at the same time, I loved it. The way he accepted his defeat at my character's hands with the vow to try harder made me feel like I was like a motivation of some sort. I wasn't beating him mercilessly, I was helping him get better. It had been quite some time since I played my Ruby game, a few years at least, but I never once misplaced it, as I suddenly got the urge to play it one day after watching Jirachi the Wishmaker movie. I found it neatly tucked away in my sock drawer in the exact same corner that I had left it. It wasn't even dusty. The cloth protection of a bunch of unused socks kept it safe from any damaging elements, which in turn answered the question as to why I had placed it in my sock drawer in the first place. I located my DS. I misplaced my old GBASP quite a while ago. Not that it mattered, and quickly inserted the red cartridge, excited to see my old, completely unbalanced Pokemon team. I selected my save file and saw that I had saved right in front of the Pokemon League, which was good considering I planned to challenge them straight away anyway. Rather, since I was there, I'd figured I'd pay my little rival a friendly visit before doing anything. First Wally, then the League. Then I'd see if there was a chance I'd been lucky enough to find my game on the day I could find Mirage Island. As I stepped away from the League entrance, following the zigzag path downward, I stopped a moment and opened my party. Normally, when I leave a Pokemon game alone for a while, I found out that the last thing I did was trade to help out my Pokedex on other games. It certainly would have been the first time that I'd enter a battle completely unaware that I had a party full of level 5 Rattata and Magikarp. It's a bit of an embarrassing situation to say the least. They're all there though. Inferno, the level 100 Blaziken, Volcano, the level 85 Groudon, Dalaros, the level 87 Rayquaza, Duragon, the level 65 Salamence, Harbinger, the level 55 Absol, and Vengeance, the level 34 Banette. As I said, painfully unbalanced, but they were all there, just as I had left them. I was relieved actually. That meant that Ruby was the game I hadn't abused the PokePark with. It must have been Emerald. But that's not really important though. I'm getting off track. My party was there, so I didn't have to waste a few minutes in going back up to the League to switch out my dinky little underleveled Pokemon for something a little better. So I began my little trek to see Wally once more. As I entered the cave, he was standing there waiting for me already. I couldn't remember if that was what he was supposed to do or not. As I said, it's been quite a long time since I've so much thought about this game, but I was excited to talk to him either way. Whether I felt guilty for beating him or not, I really loved seeing him. I approached and pressed A to talk, but rather than have him say something in greeting before challenging me to a battle, the Trainer Spotted theme played for a second or two before the screen flickered, signifying a battle had started. But just as quickly as the screen faded to black, it faded back to the normal cave scene once more. Only Wally was no longer there. I shrugged it off, thinking that years of having the cartridge had actually put a little wear into the game's workings. Not that I'm actually techno-savvy enough to really know how that'd work. I started to walk away, thinking I'd see if this glitch continued in the Pokemon League. If it did, I was out of the game. I'd either have to reset or get a new one. Either option would kill me. Inferno was the best Pokemon I've ever had, though before I could take a single step, the Pokénav rang. I didn't think it could function properly in caves and the like, but since I was kinda close to the exit in open air, I suppose it made sense for it to work. ... Wally, come to Petalburg. Click. I'm not entirely sure how to explain it. With the little hiccup my game just had with the battle scene and the fade, I'm almost positive that that small bit of dialogue wasn't scripted. I just felt uneasy. Nonetheless, I got out the cave and selected Dalaros to fly to Petalburg City. When I got there, I could definitely tell something was off. The whole area looked foggy and the colours looked as if they'd been washed out, leaving the normally cheery little town looking rather dismal. Even the music was different. Just slightly though. The tempo had been noticeably slowed, further adding to the incredibly dreary effect. I explored the area a little, going into the few of the buildings surrounding the Pokemon Center, just to see what else had changed. For one thing, no one was around. The area was completely devoid of all NPCs, but it didn't take me long to figure out where they all were. I walked up to Wally's parents' house to find 7 NPC sprites lining the path to the door, 2 columns of 3, one withstanding each side of the door. All of them wore black, and my uneasy feeling only grew. Curious, I spoke to each of them. None of them seemed happy. This shouldn't have happened. I thought he was doing so well. We thought he had beaten it. He looked up to you. Why couldn't you give him a break? He'd still be with us if not for you. He didn't think he was good enough to move further. It's your fault. I knew what was going on now, but I didn't want to believe it. But as I walked into his house, I was forced to. A couple more NPCs dotted the small room, with a small black coffin resting in the middle of the area. Wally was dead. I spoke to the other NPCs. Most only repeated, "It's all your fault." But one, which I believed was his mother, explained things a little better for me. The damp cave air aggravated his condition. He strained himself to become better so he could finally be as good as you. But he pushed himself too hard. His body gave out. A hiker found him, a Pokeball clutched in his little hand, his Pokemon refusing to leave his side. He called us using Wally's nav. You know what it's like? Being informed by a total stranger that someone you love is dead? Pay your respects and leave. This is all your fault. By now, I felt absolutely terrible. Wouldn't you? So I did as I was told. I walked up to the small casket. As soon as I touched it, the music stopped and a blank dialogue box popped up. It stayed there for a few seconds before a single word was slowly typed out. Why? A battle started, a real one this time, rather than the teaser I'd experienced earlier. My heart sank as Wally's sprite slid into the opposing trainer's spot. His skin was pale, his colours were washed out, and he looked quite sad. But what hurt the most was the opening battle announcement. Pokemon trainer Wally wants one last battle. He sent out his first Pokemon, his cherished Gardevoir, who also looked upset. I assumed this would be the trend with his Pokemon. I sent out Inferno. Sympathy urged me to throw this battle, to make his last one a good one for him. But the competitor in me said I had to give it all I had. Guess which one I listened to. Inferno plowed through each and every one of his saddened Pokemon, knocking them flat with one attack each. As the battle ended, Wally slid back into the frame, his sprite now mostly transparent, and said, "Why can't you let me win?" When the battle screen faded, Wally's mother approached my character and pushed him back away from the coffin. "Get out. You're done here. You disgust me." As she shoved me out the door, instead of appearing outside the house, the screen cut to white and began rolling the credits. As the names of those involved in the production of the game faded in and out, the white was replaced by an ending scene. Poor Wally's funeral procession. NPC sprites slowly paraded through Petalburg, a tiny casket at the centre of the crowd. My eyes watered as they slowly left through the right exit of the city. The camera followed as they stopped at a small patch of grass where Wally had caught his deer Rolts. When they stopped, they all turned to face the screen. Just for a second, but I could almost feel the judgment as they turned back to the casket. The screen faded to white, and Wally's trainer sprite faded in. Beneath it, there were 3 little words. In loving memory. Hello, I'm your average Pokemon enthusiast. I grew up in the usual way, playing Pokemon Red, Blue, Gold, Silver, etc. I've always had the fascination with the series, since its inception in the 90s. Well, in reality, my fascination was more of an obsession. I had to, and I mean had to, play every single Pokemon game, and I see every single one of them through to the end. Every time a new one came out, I was the first in line at Walmart, Target, or GameStop. I would even buy one on eBay when I had no other option. I had played through every single Pokemon game by the time X and Y was slated to be released. Or so I thought. This is my narrative on a game that I came across recently that, you guessed it, I wish I'd never come across in the first place. Before you get the wrong idea, this game isn't evil or haunted, at least not that I know of. It was just very upsetting. I'm writing this as a cathartic means of releasing the affliction this game has caused me. Why would anyone have made this game? After reading my story, maybe you can tell me. My account starts just a month ago. I was reminiscing about old video games with my college roommate while walking around campus. We did that sometimes when we had nothing better to do. Anyways, I told him that I'd played every single Pokemon game there was right from the get-go, from red and blue all the way to black and white, and soon I would play X and Y. It's not that my claim was all that impressive, it's just that most of the fans of the series had always played one or the other in each generation of its release. Red or blue, gold or silver, and so on and so on. I played all of them. Even Crystal? He asked. Yes. Emerald? Yes. Platinum? Yes, every single one. After a few moments of thinking, he asked me about one more. What about Pokemon Yellow? Just then, my heart sunk. I never played Yellow. My obsession didn't really start until after I'd played Gold and Silver. That's when the Pokemon games became a series. By then, I must have forgotten about Yellow. How could I have forgotten Pokemon Yellow? I said aloud. My friend just laughed in satisfaction. He clearly didn't realise the weight of the situation. I have an obsessive compulsive need to play every last Pokemon game. How did I miss Yellow? After sulking for the rest of the day, I went to bed. I had a weird dream about Pokemon Snap. I was in the game taking pictures. Everything seemed normal, but when I passed the water, a Lapras popped out. He was holding a copy of Pokemon Yellow in his mouth. I reached for it, but he swam away. That's when I woke up. This dream should explicate to you just how imperative it was for me to play every Pokemon game. I spent the next day hunting down my own copy of the game. I texted friends, but none of them had one. I went to GameStop, but they'd stopped selling original Game Boy games. Unable to find a prompt form of retrieving the game, I tried my luck on eBay. I found 3 different copies in my price range, but I was outbid every time. I only had $11 in my PayPal account. Damn it! I yelled out loud in my empty dorm room. I skipped class today, just to find this game, but to no avail. What can I do now? I started researching the game online. After an hour of doing so, I found a link in my search results. Unlike the rest of the hits, this one was just a link. It said Pokemon Gold and Yellow, nothing else. Disregarding the fact that the odd looking link could potentially harm my laptop, I clicked on it. What can I say? I was curious. The link brought me to a website void of any information. There were just 2 links. One was titled GB Emulator, and the other was titled PokemonYellow.gb. I wanted to avoid having to play Yellow with an emulator at all costs, but I was running out of options. I downloaded the files. After installing the emulator and moving around the necessary files, I started playing the game. Everything was normal. Oak explained the world of Pokemon, I named my character, and then I was on my way. Like Red and Blue, I was left in my bedroom atop my home. I went downstairs and found everything there was ordinary as well, aside from the fact that my mum was unmovable. She just sat there at the table, and I was unable to speak to her. I blamed that on lazy programming. Maybe the person who transposed Yellow from cartridge to file found the mother to be an unimportant element of the game and didn't bother making her sprite functional. I later decided that the action was deliberate to add effect to the game. I made my way outside, and to my surprise, Pallet Town was completely empty, other than my house. At first, I wondered if this was part of the game, considering I'd never played Yellow before. I quickly discarded the theory though, realising that such a thing would be nonsensical. I couldn't even walk through the grass to Viridian City without being met with an invisible wall. I'd found myself trapped in an empty version of my favourite town from Pokemon games. It made me feel uneasy. After walking around aimlessly for about 5 minutes, I decided to see if I had any Pokemon. I expected a Pikachu, even though he wasn't walking behind me. I didn't know that part of the game at least. I had one Pokemon. I shouldn't say Pokemon. It was an egg. A golden egg. At least that's what the description said. A golden egg. While its name said the usual question mark, I say usual, but it was nothing but unusual to have an egg in Pokemon Yellow. Breeding Pokemon to lay eggs didn't come out until Pokemon Gold and Silver were released. I took a look at my map to make sure I was in the Kanto region. The map displayed Pallet Town and a straight line leading to another town, but nothing else. It was like I was on a long, narrow island. I assumed the town above Pallet Town was Radeon City, but I was wrong. Very wrong. It was none other than Goldenrod City, a city that wasn't even in the Kanto region. It was almost as if the person who made this game was trying to somehow combine Pokemon Yellow and Pokemon Gold and Silver. But why? And why only have these two towns on one narrow stretch of land? The game was a little too weird for my taste. But I had nothing better to do with my day of hooky, so I kept playing. I decided to hatch the egg. I walked around in endless circles for what felt like forever. Finally, it hatched. During the hatching animation, I couldn't help but wonder what Pokemon would break free from the golden egg. I guess there might be some weird Pokemon that doesn't exist. I figured the game was a hack, and even though I'd never played one, I read that some of them contain Pokemon of the programmer's creation. After sitting through the animation, I found my assumption to be wrong. It was a Pikachu. That wasn't so bad. He even walked behind me like a normal one in Yellow. After walking around with him for the sake of a minute or so, I looked at his stats. He was level 5 and had normal stats. I looked at his sprite and saw that he was discoloured. He wasn't yellow, he was gold. I guess Pikachus that hatch from golden eggs come out looking gold. I laughed in my head at the odd nature of this game. It was too amusing to put down. I looked at my golden Pikachu's moves to discover that he only had one: Fly. This time, I laughed out loud. A level 5 golden Pikachu that can fly. Admit it, that's a little funny. I guess I had to fly out of Pallet Town to progress, so I did. I flew to Goldenrod City. It's not like I could fly anywhere else. What I found there was less amusing and more disquieting. Goldenrod City was a ghost town. Each and every door in the building was fortified. I couldn't walk in, nor could I get a reaction when I pressed the emulator's A button, much like my mum at the beginning of the game. I couldn't even walk into the radio tower. There weren't even any people walking around. With every step I took, I became more and more anxious, but I was pleased to see my Pikachu following me. At least there was something interactive in the game. I walked south to leave town, and to my delight, I could finally make some progress. After I left Goldenrod, I realised I was walking along Route 34, just as I would be in Gold or Silver. I had the maps from every Pokemon game memorised, plus the daycare centre was a dead giveaway. I noticed the daycare centre but kept walking to see how far I could get. I was curious to see how the creator of the game connected Pallet Town and Goldenrod City. I didn't get far at all. Another invisible wall stunted my venture, just as I passed the daycare. This was as far as I could walk. With no other viable options, I tried the daycare centre. Luckily, it was a serviceable building, unlike the rest. I was able to walk in. Upon entering, I noticed nothing unusual. I went over to the daycare man and hit the A button. Ah, your golden egg has finally hatched. This is a most momentous milestone in your Pokemon journey. Not many trainers can claim to have a golden Pikachu. Take care now. That's it? Now what? I spoke to him again, and all he could say was, take care now. I talked to the daycare man's wife, and she too repeated the same thing, but instead of take care now, all she could say was, don't upset him. Upset who? Pikachu? The daycare man? Either way, it was a strange thing to say. I walked out to the enclosure where the Pokemon would normally breed, and there was a generic Pokemon sprite. I always thought that these sprites looked like Eevee, all by its lonesome. Maybe this was the him I shouldn't upset? I walked over to it and clicked the A button. To my amazement, the Pokemon spoke. I never learned what Pokemon it was, so I just nicknamed him V, after the Eevee experimented on by Team Rocket in the Pokemon manga. I guess I just like putting a name to a face. Don't ask me why I found this name fitting, but here is what V said. Hello, I can see that you are a Pokemon trainer. Do you enjoy training your Pokemon? I was given an option, yes or no. In fact, I was bombarded with such questions. For this one, I chose yes. Do you want your Pokemon to grow stronger? I chose yes. Would you stop at nothing to become the best Pokemon trainer you could be? I chose yes. Even if it meant putting your Pikachu in harm's way? I chose no, but V simply said, don't lie. And I was given the option again. I was beginning to think that I had to choose yes no matter what, so I chose yes. Your Pokemon is of a special breed. You should know how lucky you are. I was given the option again, yes or no. What? That was a statement. I chose no. Don't lie. I chose yes. V was beginning to shake my calmness. A golden Pokemon is a gift. You should never harm a gift. Yes or no? These weren't even questions. These questions were also becoming less and less intelligible. This made me feel a little perturbed. Unable to choose no, I picked yes once again. Taking your Pokemon to battle is harmful fun for you. That isn't even a proper sentence. I chose yes. You damage your Pokemon. I chose yes. You can't be stopped. I chose yes. Neither can I. I wasn't given an option this time. Instead, the screen became glitchy for an instant, and my Pikachu had vanished. I also noticed that the water on the small pond had changed colour. It became reddish. I assumed it was some sort of contrast issue on my monitor. I spoke to V again, and he said, I ended your gift before you could. I kept talking to him, but that's all he would say. I hit start and looked at my Pokemon. There was nothing there. I sat for a second and looked around. I determined that maybe the discoloration in the pond wasn't a contrast issue at all. I walked over it and pressed A. I heard a Pikachu's battle cry. A text box appeared that said, "The water is calm and red." After this, the game closed itself, as if it was over. I started it up again, played through, and the exact same thing happened. That was the entire game. I can't really describe to you the sinking feeling I had in the pit of my stomach after playing this game, twice no less. It was like witnessing something so morally grotesque that it just ruins your day, and as much as you try, you just can't seem to shake it. It's like a dark image that you feel you need to erase from your memory. I can only gather that V killed my Pikachu, and the red in the water behind the daycare was my Pikachu's blood. Why would anyone make this game? Honestly, I don't care. I just want to forget about it. I no longer feel the need to play Pokemon Yellow. The game I played on the emulator didn't traumatize me, but it did affect me. My obsession had become tainted. I may play Pokemon Yellow one day, but I don't need to. Writing this has made me feel a little bit better. Well, that's all.